They called them the horsemen of the apocalypse. From the steppes of Mongolia, they rode like a storm, fast, brutal, and unstoppable. To the Muslim world, they weren't just an army. They were an earthquake, a divine punishment, and an existential threat all at once. But here's the twist most people don't talk about. The same Mongols who burned cities to ashes, who slaughtered millions, and who left Baghdad in ruins, eventually became some of Islam's fiercest defenders. How did that even happen? How did one of history's bloodiest conflicts transform into one of the greatest stories of faith and redemption? That's what we're diving into today. The rise of the Mongols, their clash with the Muslim world, the devastation they caused, and the unbelievable way this story turned around. Imagine the 13th century. The Muslim world was vast, stretching from Spain in the west to the heart of India in the east. The Abbasid Caliphate, though weakened politically, was still the spiritual center of Islam. Baghdad was the jewel of the world. Its libraries, scholars, and scientists were centuries ahead of their time. But in the Far East, on the windswept steppes of Mongolia, something was brewing. A boy named Temujin, scarred by betrayal, abandonment, and war, was forging himself into someone the world had never seen before, a man who would become Genghis Khan. He wasn't just building an army, he was building a machine, a force disciplined, loyal, and terrifyingly efficient. And soon, the Muslim world would find itself right in its path. This isn't just about history. It's about the lessons we keep forgetting. How arrogance, division, and complacency can destroy even the strongest nations. How faith can survive, even thrive, in the ashes of devastation. And how enemies can become allies in ways no one could have predicted. By the end of this story, you'll see why what happened 800 years ago isn't just a chapter in history books. It's a warning, a lesson, and a strange kind of hope for today. The Mongols didn't just appear out of nowhere. To understand the storm that swept across Asia, you have to understand the land that shaped them. The Mongolian steppe was harsh, unforgiving, and endless. Winters could kill an unprepared man in hours. Resources were scarce. Life was about survival, and survival required skill, discipline, and an almost brutal sense of loyalty to your tribe. From the time they could walk, Mongol children learned to ride. By the age of 5, they were handling bows with deadly precision. Every man, woman, and child understood that the horse was more than just transportation. It was life itself. This environment didn't create soldiers. It created warriors, fast, fearless, and disciplined in a way no other army at the time could match. Temujin was born into chaos. His father was poisoned when he was just a boy, leaving his family abandoned and vulnerable. Many believed his tribe would fade into history, just another forgotten name. But Temujin was different. Through sheer determination, intelligence, and a gift for strategy, he began to unite the scattered Mongol tribes. He didn't just unite them with fear. He gave them something more powerful, a vision. He broke old tribal loyalties, promoting men based on merit rather than bloodlines. If you were loyal and capable, you rose in his ranks, whether you were a peasant or a noble. That created something no one else in the region had, a disciplined, loyal, and highly motivated army. By 1206, Temujin had done what no one else could. He was declared Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. And with that title, the world changed forever. The Mongol army was unlike anything the medieval world had seen. They could move hundreds of miles in a matter of days, carrying everything they needed. Their relay system allowed messages to travel faster than any empire of the time. They used psychological warfare, deception, and intelligence networks to weaken their enemies before a single arrow was loosed. To the Mongols, war wasn't chaos, it was art. And as they looked westward, the Islamic world was about to find itself in the crosshairs of history. The Islamic world in the early 13th century was powerful but divided. From Persia to Central Asia, rulers fought one another for power. The Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad still held spiritual authority, But politically, the Muslim lands were fractured, a situation Genghis Khan would exploit. It began with what seemed like a simple trade mission. Genghis Khan, seeking to open trade routes with the Khwarezmian Empire, a massive Muslim kingdom stretching across Persia and Central Asia, sent a caravan of merchants. But something went terribly wrong. Suspicious of Mongol intentions, a governor under Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad seized the caravan, accused them of spying, and executed them. When Genghis Khan heard the news, he didn't react with rage, at least not at first. He sent envoys to negotiate peace and demand justice. The Shah responded by executing the envoys, a grave insult in Mongol culture. That was the point of no return. Genghis Khan swore vengeance, not just on the Shah, but on his entire empire. In 1219, the Mongol war machine moved westward. What followed was nothing short of apocalyptic. Cities like Bokhara and Samarkand, centers of Islamic culture and learning, were obliterated. Tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, were killed. Those who survived carried stories of terror, stories that spread fear far beyond the battlefields. The Mongols didn't just conquer, they shattered. They understood the power of fear. By sparing a few survivors to spread tales of destruction, they made entire cities surrender without a fight. Within 2 years, what had been a vast and powerful Muslim empire was gone. The Shah fled, dying a lonely and humiliated death on an island in the Caspian Sea. His people, his lands, his legacy, gone. This was only the beginning. The Mongols had now tasted the wealth of the Muslim world, and they would not stop until their banners cast shadows over the very heart of Islamic civilization. After the destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire, the Mongols had carved a bloody path through Central Asia. But their ambitions didn't stop there. The Islamic world still held powerful cities. Baghdad, the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate, was the jewel of the Muslim empire. By the mid-13th century, Genghis Khan was gone, but his empire lived on. His grandson, Hulagu Khan, took command of the Western campaigns. Unlike his grandfather, Hulagu wasn't just looking for tribute or alliances. He aimed for total domination. The Mongols sent an ultimatum to Baghdad. Submit, and you will be spared. Resist, and your city will burn. But the Abbasid Caliph, Al-Mustasim, underestimated the Mongols. He believed that the Islamic world would rally to Baghdad's defense and that the city was invincible. It was a grave miscalculation. In January 1258, Hulagu's army surrounded Baghdad with an estimated 150,000 troops. They built bridges over the Tigris River. They cut off food and supplies. They used siege weapons, including massive catapults, to rain destruction on the city walls. For 2 weeks, Baghdad resisted. Then the walls fell. What followed is one of the darkest chapters in Islamic history. The city's libraries, including the legendary House of Wisdom, were destroyed. Priceless manuscripts, scientific works, and centuries of knowledge were thrown into the Tigris, turning its waters black with ink. Historians estimate 200,000 to 1 million people were massacred. The Caliph himself was executed, ending a line of Abbasid rulers that had lasted for centuries. The great city of learning, trade, and faith, the city once called the center of the world, was reduced to ashes. The fall of Baghdad sent shockwaves across the Islamic world. Cities trembled at the mere mention of Mongol armies. Muslim scholars and leaders began to question, had God abandoned them? The unity and confidence of the Islamic world were shattered. But in this despair, seeds of resistance were being sown. New leaders were rising, leaders who would eventually turn the tide against the Mongols. The fall of Baghdad in 1258 had left the Muslim world paralyzed with fear. The Mongols seemed unstoppable, sweeping through city after city like a storm no one could tame. But in the shadows of this despair, resistance was taking root, and it would soon change history. Far to the west, in Egypt, a unique power was emerging, the Mamluks. Originally enslaved soldiers trained in the art of war, the Mamluks had risen through the ranks to take control of Egypt. Under leaders like Sultan Qutuz and Baibars, these warriors were disciplined, hardened, and fiercely loyal to the defense of Islam. When word of Baghdad's fall reached Cairo, the Mamluks knew they could be next. They began preparing for the inevitable confrontation. After Baghdad, Hulagu's forces pushed into Syria and Palestine, capturing Aleppo and Damascus. With their confidence soaring, they sent a chilling message to Cairo: submit to Mongol rule or face total destruction. But the Mamluks refused to bend the knee. As the Mongol armies prepared to march on Egypt, a sudden event shifted the balance. Hulagu Khan was forced to retreat back east to deal with political disputes in Mongolia. He left behind a smaller force under his general, Kitbuka, to maintain control of the region. This gave the Mamluks their opportunity. March to Ain Jalut, 1260. Sultan Qutuz and Baibars rallied their forces and marched north to confront the Mongols in the Jezreel Valley of Palestine, near a place called Ain Jalut. Their army, though smaller, was united and motivated by faith. Imams traveled with the soldiers, reminding them of their duty to protect the Ummah. The battle. On September 3, 1260, the two forces clashed. The Mamluks used brilliant tactics, including feigned retreats to lure the Mongols into ambushes. The disciplined cavalry of the Mamluks overwhelmed the Mongol forces. By the end of the day, the once feared Mongol army was in full retreat, and General Kitbuka was captured and executed. A victory for the ages. The Battle of Ain Jalut marked the first major defeat of the Mongols in open battle. For the first time, the myth of Mongol invincibility was shattered. The Muslim world saw hope again, proof that unity, faith, and strategy could overcome even the most terrifying of enemies. The victory at Ain Jalut in 1260 was more than just a military triumph. It was a spiritual and psychological turning point for the Muslim world. What followed was the rise of one of the greatest military strategists and leaders in Islamic history, Sultan Baibars. The rise of Baibars. After the death of Sultan Qutuz shortly after Ain Jalut, Baibars assumed leadership of the Mamluks. Known as the Panther, Baibars was a brilliant tactician and a man of fierce discipline. He understood that the Mongols would regroup and return, so he wasted no time strengthening defenses and uniting the fractured regions of the Muslim world. Baibars wasn't just a warrior. He was a strategist, a diplomat, and a man of vision. Securing the heartlands. Baibars focused first on securing Syria and Palestine. He rebuilt cities devastated by the Mongols. Fortresses were repaired and armies trained. He established an intelligence network to monitor Mongol movements and potential betrayals. His leadership turned Egypt and Syria into a fortress ready to withstand any new invasions. The spiritual revival. Beyond the battlefield, Baibars understood the importance of morale and faith. Mosques and madrasas were rebuilt to revive scholarship. Friday sermons reminded people that victory comes from Allah, inspiring unity and hope. This spiritual revival strengthened the bond between rulers and the people, creating a sense of purpose that transcended fear. Clashes with the Mongols. The Mongols, humiliated at Ain Jalut, attempted several times to retake their lost territories. Baibars anticipated their moves, often outmaneuvering and ambushing their forces. These repeated defeats slowly eroded the Mongols' grip on the Levant. For the first time since their rise, the Mongols faced an opponent they couldn't intimidate or easily crush. The end of Mongol expansion in the region. By the late 1260s, the Muslim lands that had once trembled under the hooves of Mongol horses were beginning to heal. Cities like Damascus and Aleppo flourished again under Mamluk protection. Trade routes reopened, scholars returned, and communities rebuilt. The fear that had paralyzed the Ummah after the fall of Baghdad was finally beginning to lift. The Mongol invasions reshaped the world, and their impact lingered for centuries. Even after their advance was stopped in the Muslim world, The echoes of their campaigns could be felt in politics, culture, and faith across Asia, the Middle East, and even Europe. The psychological impact. The fall of Baghdad in 1258 left deep scars. Baghdad, once the beating heart of the Islamic Golden Age, was now a broken city. Scholars were displaced, libraries destroyed, and institutions that had stood for centuries were gone overnight. This trauma forced the Muslim world to reflect, not only on the cost of disunity, but also on the need for spiritual and intellectual revival. The unexpected conversions. One of the most surprising twists in history was what happened after the Mongol conquest slowed. Many Mongols, once seen as the destroyers of Islam, began to embrace Islam themselves. Generals, soldiers, and eventually rulers of Mongol khanates, like the Ilkhanate in Persia, converted. Within a few generations, the descendants of those who had burned cities were now building mosques, sponsoring scholars, and defending the faith they once sought to destroy. A shift in global power. The Mongol Empire had opened vast trade routes. The famous Silk Road flourished during their reign. Muslim merchants and scholars traveled further than ever, exchanging not just goods but ideas. This global connectivity allowed Islamic civilization to maintain its intellectual influence despite the political chaos. Lessons of unity and resilience. The era of Mongol invasions taught the Ummah two unforgettable lessons. Disunity is weakness. When Muslims were divided, they fell easily. Faith and courage can turn the tide. The victories of Ain Jalut and Baybar's campaigns showed that belief, strategy, and unity could overcome even the fiercest enemy. The legacy of the Mamluks. The Mamluks, once slaves, became the shield of the Muslim world. Their disciplined armies and strong leadership not only halted the Mongols, but also pushed back Crusader influence in the Levant. Cairo emerged as a new intellectual and cultural hub, keeping the torch of Islamic scholarship burning bright after Baghdad's fall. Closing, the lessons history left us. The story of the Mongols and the Muslim world isn't just history, it's a mirror. It reflects what happens when a people lose their unity and let their internal divisions weaken them. It also shows the incredible resilience of faith, how a civilization brought to its knees found the strength to rise again. From the ruins of Baghdad to the victories of Ain Jalut, and from the fear of annihilation to the embrace of Islam by former enemies, this chapter of history teaches that no matter how dark the storm, renewal is always possible when there is faith, courage, and vision. This isn't just a lesson for historians or scholars. It's a timeless reminder for every generation.